Thanks for joining us. You've had a really interesting and nonlinear path from social to gaming and now to crypto. Um, I'd like to start with Myspace. What were some of your early stage learnings, and what do you think you could have done differently or would do differently today?
Yeah, so for me, it's always sort of been thinking about macroeconomic trends. So for many of you that probably don't remember this, in 2003, 2004 was around the time where every phone began to have a camera. Um, Broadband started to become ubiquitous. People were more comfortable socializing online. There was less of a stigma with that. People were mostly communicating with IM and email, and none of this was fun. Like IM and email, it wasn't fun. Sharing your photos on OPhoto or Shutterfly, with your grandparents isn't fun. And so it was sort of all of those macro factors that we thought would be really interesting to put together. And so that's kind of how I look at it. It's not so much of, hey, let's start a company this year. Let me find another partner, and what would be a good company to start? It's kind of there in front of you where you recognize things that are going on and then test out the product. Think about what the product might be to meet the market demands. And so that's really how we got involved with that. And before that, I was with a company called, one of the co-founders of a company called XDrive, which was like all of the opposite of what I just mentioned. It was a cloud data storage company for individuals, and people didn't really need it because everyone had laptops and would store all their files on their laptops, and it never really went anywhere.
I've heard you attribute the fall of MySpace to monetizing too early. If you were to go back in time, what would you have done differently? And then on the flip side, looking ahead, what does the future of monetization and social look like to you?
Yeah, so anytime you're selling your company or taking money from a company, you need to make sure that you're incredibly aligned with your partners. So we started MySpace in 2003. We sold the company to News Corp, which then became Fox in 2005. We were this growth company, way bigger than YouTube, way bigger than Facebook. We got to be bigger than Yahoo, the number one site in the world. And one day, out of the blue, Rupert Murdoch goes on, I don't know, CNBC, or maybe it was during an earnings call, and said, hey, MySpace is going to do $1 billion in revenue and $250 million in EBITDA, like without talking to any of us. And so it was like, okay, that's the new milestone, and that's the new North Star. And it wasn't the right thing for the company. So they had a growth company. And there's nothing, sorry, they had like a profit-based company. We had a growth company, and there's nothing wrong with either. It's just they weren't aligned or they weren't compatible. Whereby so what the result was is we ended up doing a deal with Google that year where they paid us $300 million a year. We ended up doing about $700 million within a couple years in revenue, very profitably. But we had to jam in all of these ads that made pages load slower. It made the user experience more junky. There was no quality control on the type of advertising that was posted. And meanwhile, if you look at Facebook at that time, they had no ads. They had a pristine user experience. Any of the user functions were very optimized. So if you wanted to accept a friend request, that was one step. Versus on MySpace, do you really want to accept this? Are you sure? Congratulations, so it's 4 pages instead of 1.
And that was because of the ad-based monetization.
Yes, because you go to the finance department and you say, okay, I'm going to knock out $40 million this year because this is absolutely ridiculous. It's not a technical feat to take 4 steps to 1 or a user interface feat. It was just more of a finance thing. And so there was always a lot of push-pull there. So that was certainly one issue, but not to say all bad things. It's like a lot of people probably hate Rupert Murdoch, but he's like an amazing entrepreneur, and he makes decisions incredibly quickly. He's very decisive, and there was a lot I learned from him. But yeah, those were like the profit motives when you're a year and a half into like a social business or like an entertainment business that is a function of driving as many people as you can through word of mouth, geometrically, is just was not consistent with that. And then I think the second thing that I would say is like, you become the biggest website in the world from like a unique visitors perspective, and you're the biggest social network.
And how big were you guys at the time?
I know, like billions of page views.
I bet he couldn't have imagined that it could get bigger than that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I don't think anyone thought like what really knew exactly what mobile would do to all this. But like I think it's easy to get caught up in yourself and like, oh, we're so far ahead of everyone else that no one else can catch up, and we don't have to worry about certain cleanup from like user experience to like what I'm talking about, like on the ads, to trying to develop too many features at one time. Like we had the biggest music service in the world. We had a video service. We just kept adding tabs, like television. There was this thing called Craigslist back then. So
I found my first apartment on Craigslist.
Yeah, which was awesome. But like we said, like, okay, we have a bigger network than them. Let's just add a tab. And so yeah, focusing on like a real super core experience, I think is something that I would have done differently versus trying to go super wide and leverage everyone in the network.
There's so much there that I want to talk about, but maybe let's talk about your transition from social then to games.
Yes.
How did your learnings from Myspace inform the way that you built and then monetized Jam City? What was like what held and then sort of what changed?
Yeah. So towards the end of, I'd say maybe about halfway through my time at Myspace. So let's call it 2006, 2007. I left in 2009. We began to have a platform on Myspace. So if you remember, like Facebook had their platform, and Zynga emerged with like all these casual games that you could play with your friends. And it was a huge eye-opener because games were largely relegated to like a much younger demographic that would play on a console. And this completely democratized the ability for anyone to play games. And like it showed that you could make money on casual games, which was incredibly interesting to me. And it showed like how the social piece of it really fit in. So that got me excited. And then I would also say that during that time, around that exact time, we had a joint venture with SoftBank and Masayoshi-san in Japan for Myspace Japan. And we would go out and visit all the consumer companies there. And like over half of all of the consumer companies that we visited there, they had said like half of their traffic was going through mobile, which is like maybe 10% here in the United States. So it kind of became clear that everyone would have a console in their pocket, and that could get super interesting.
It's interesting that today, like even now, Asia still leads a lot of the metrics in Web3 gaming too, and it's sort of they've led the charge with play-to-earn gaming last year and the year before, and sort of like the West still is starting to catch up. I want to talk about the history of gamertainment. So I think it's become pretty clear that it's no longer enough for an IP universe to win on just one medium. You have to win across all mediums, or at least multiple mediums. Like the game is really like an attention game now, which is something that has made gaming really attractive to NFT projects over the last 2 years. You were one of the early pioneers in the gamertainment space, and you made a bunch of really smart acquisitions early on in your time at Jam City, which I think was then called SGN. that reflected this vision. How has your thesis on gamertainment changed over the last 10 years? And then how do you see it shifting over the next 5, perhaps because of Web3?
Yeah, so early on, when we developed our first mobile games at Jam City, so like when I was kind of deciding what to do after MySpace, it was like, oh, should it be music, video, or games? What gets me personally really excited is seeing people use any product that our team makes and seeing it out in the wild, whether it's on a plane or, I don't know, at a restaurant or whatever. And games became my number one choice because, again, there was this underserved crowd that was out there. And everyone was beginning to be able to play these games on mobile. But when we came out with our first, 2 top 20 in the world hit games that were just, crushing it, each of them were doing like, I don't know, we were a startup and they were each doing well over $100 million a year in revenue. And but then there was only like 300,000 or 400,000 games in the App Store. Now there's probably 3 million. Back then, you could see that the majority of these games came from California or Europe. So the Chinese market that were building games and exporting them here didn't quite have the same graphics and fidelity, and same thing with Eastern Europe. And as basically all of the regions in the world have caught up to where we are here and have been able to do it much less expensively, there's now like millions of apps in the App Store where everything's become way more competitive. You have to have a much better product. Everything is a function of what we call live operations. So creating fun, fast, fresh, new content literally every day, which is very, very expensive. And so once you have a great game that's out there, it can be almost evergreen if you do a good job in live operations and continually managing the economy and increasing. So we had like several metrics that we went from. One was like D1 retention, D7, D28, D60, D90, 1 year retention, and then average revenue per daily user. Probably not that much different than the type of metrics that you guys look at. But like always trying to increase those by a little bit and testing out different pricing models, always having new events, messing with the economy, bringing in different IPs like Harry Potter. We brought a Harry Potter game in that's done very, very well. This is all at Jam City. But yeah, I think as a lot of that consolidation happened, and we generated a lot of that consolidation, we acquired a lot of different companies. We had deep expertise in a lot of different genres. It still became, prices were high, and UA or marketing or the amount of money that you spend on Facebook, the margins started coming down on the amount of we called return on ad spend, made it so it was like a less interesting market where we're spending all of this time and money constantly updating everything every day. And it became clear to me, like kind of going back to my days at MySpace and thinking about social and why games weren't more social, that like if you created a shared economy with your players or with your users, which is where, if you want to call them digital assets or NFTs, people don't seem to like the term NFTs anymore, so you can call them digital assets, but essentially the same thing where people have been spending thousands and if not hundreds of thousands of dollars playing games like over many, many years, but they have nothing to really show for it from an ownership perspective. And it's more fun to play a fun game and own your assets in the game and have something a little bit at stake to make it more fun. So some people call that Web3 gaming. We are personally just making an awesome metaverse with an amazing AAA game as a central sort of hub for this metaverse. and like adding digital assets within that space.
So maybe now this is a good time to talk about PLAI. You co-founded Jam City, and yet you decided to leave now to start PLAI. Why did you spin it out? Why Web3 specifically for PLAI? Can you walk us through how you made those decisions?
Sure. I think approximately every 10 years, something really interesting happens that gets me excited. So like I mentioned earlier, during the Myspace time, it was more of a collaborative, sharing, like interactive community. And I'm talking about like YouTube and Myspace and Facebook and Instagram. And that got me really excited. It was a huge sea change. And then, I don't know, call it 8 or 9 years later, 10 years later, mobile became mainstream where, again, everyone had a console in their pocket. And you saw like everything from e-commerce to dating apps to like what I thought gaming would be gaming, like to ad companies completely transform. And new companies came in and the old ones sort of got washed away that couldn't keep up. So like Yahoo kind of went away, Match.com went away a little bit, and Tinder came in. And so that was a very special time for me. And I think there's something very similar is happening now with both Web3 and AI. I think from a Web3 perspective, you have the whole ownership aspect of it. You have more control from, I don't know if you want to call it big tech or, you know, whatever you want to call it. You have ownership. Things are decentralized, and it just makes a lot more sense. And then from an AI perspective, it's really democratized the notion of what a content creator can be. Seen it with, art for sure, and images for sure, and GPT. And so we have a consumer-based app that we're rolling out that's a social app that's all based from generative art AI. And that's launched to about 1,000 people right now, and we're going to roll it out to probably 10,000, and then hopefully it'll go very viral and hundreds of millions after that, or not. So we'll see.
So, okay, you're somebody who has like built networks for the last several decades, and you had a front row seat to the design choices, the network design choices that created the business models that we take for granted today. I'd be curious to hear, sort of your retro on how different network design choices materially affected your ability to monetize, and then how you think about network building today, or maybe protocol building today, which I think is something that's probably useful for a bunch of the builders in this room.
Yeah, I think it depends like what you're trying to build, because we see like a lot of different networks today. You see more utility-based networks like a Signal or a Telegram, which have much more of a closed type of network or a controlled type of network where both people sort of accept the notion that they're going to be communicating with each other in a more private type of environment, and those serve a specific need. But then, like, I think there's the more entertainment type of user or customer where you need to keep it more open or allow those creators to have the choice to do so, to have like a very open architecture that allows them to open up their work to everyone, or keep it to a really small group of folks.
I want to talk a little bit about like how you think about the path to finding product market fit in crypto. I know that you have like a very systematic, like heavily indexing on pre-production and early user testing approach to building games and like finding product market fit for games. How do you think about that for crypto? Does crypto change the strategy there? There's obviously a token-based incentive loop that a bunch of games have sort of capitalized on over the last 2 years. How do you think about your unique method for finding?
Yeah. So my point is, in a very long-winded way, we're not chasing after what I would call like a Web3 gaming audience. I think that audience right now is probably less than 1 million unique wallets per month. And when you're looking at like many, many billions worldwide. So I think we're marketing it a little bit differently, and we're hoping that people that love to play really fun games, whether it's World of Warcraft or any RPG, MMO that's out there, will want to play Champions Ascension, Champions.io, more than other games because of the decentralization, because of the ownership. I also think the community is super interesting. We were able to build our audience through community, which is very different than the way we did it in mobile. It's completely different than mobile. We're still able to do the same kind of testing and have smaller groups try different features, but we're able to get a lot of information.
I want to pivot a little bit to talking about deal-making do's and don'ts, because you're known for your business savviness. Do you have any tips here for the group? What do you think crypto companies should know when engaging with big brands or partnerships?
Right. So big brands and partnerships can be great. I think it's like you want to think about, does that big brand fit what you're doing, the brand of your particular product? I don't know, like we used to think that Mickey Mouse would be super interesting, and then there's like 3 Mickey Mouse games came up, and they were all terrible. So that wasn't necessarily a good fit, but Harry Potter was, because nothing had come out on Harry Potter. It was multi-generational. There was massive lore around it that was untapped, and that game has done great for us. And we did all of our own writing. It was the first lore that had been written for 10 years on it, and it did really well. So there's I would say how much have they exploited it? If they've exploited it too much, it's bad. If it's not a good fit for your demo, it's probably not great. Then you also need to look at who you're working with. Some brands are notoriously difficult to work with. So a Star Wars is pretty picky to work with, and things can take a little bit longer. And there's other brands that are very.
And what's the best way for entrepreneurs to find out this information?
I think networking. I don't know. You could call any game company that has done, for sure any game company, but basically anyone that's done any kind of licensing deal from IP and seen how it's worked for them. You can look at. I don't know if you've heard of App Annie or Sensor Tower, but these are, I'm sure you guys have.
Yeah, we've got a bunch of these.
Subscriptions to those, but you can see which games are doing well, which ones are growing. You can go play those games. You can enjoy whatever other experiences they have. But yeah, I think it's a function of networking and then looking at data that is just out there. There's other brand studies that you can find online that are out there. I think there's a lot of things. The other thing is, is your game primarily in the U.S. or are you looking for a global reach? Because there's a lot of television brands, for example, that are very U.S. based or very U.S. and Canada based. That, like the Simpsons, a lot of people haven't heard of that, for example, or maybe it was Family Guy, one of the two. They hadn't really heard of that in other countries, so you have to sort of tamp down your expectations there. And then finally, the financial commitment, which there's usually what they call an MG or a minimum guarantee. We have to pay a certain amount of money, and then you recoup against that minimum guarantee. So maybe let's just say there's a 10% rev share. So for 10% of all my money, and let's say I have a minimum guarantee that I'm paying Disney of $5 million. I'm paying 10% back till I get to the $5 million, and then I recoup my minimum guarantee, and then after that, I need to pay them 10% on an ongoing basis. And then the other question that you need to ask yourself is what is the definition of the revenue share? Is it before or after marketing
And
expenses.
have these like terms shifted over time,
Yes.
like either in favor of game developers or, partners away from the IP or toward the IP? Like, sort of, how has the power shift happened?
So for games, I think there have been fewer and fewer games that have the expertise to build a really big service or product. And brands do care about that because they don't want to waste money on like bringing, I don't know, you have Disney, I don't know what their revenue, like let's just say it's like 50 billion in revenue. Like they don't really care about bringing in a $2 million guarantee. They want to know that this can be super profitable franchise over the next 10 to 20 year period of time. So they're really looking at who they're working with, and that's how they're making their decisions. And I think there are.
So would you say they've become less focused on minimum guarantees over
Yes.
time and are more interested in
Yes.
like the rev share?
The rev share and the people and the relationships. So as soon as you can get in there and start creating those relationships, and with some things like good, pretty decks don't matter. I would say with those types of folks, good, pretty decks matter a lot, and a lot of thought process in terms of what the game mechanics are and how it's differentiated matters a lot, and how that, because that reflects on their brand at the end of the day.
Awesome. I think that we are at time, and so I'm going to open up the floor to questions. If anyone wants to ask Chris some questions.
Hi, Brandon. Great talk. Thanks for all the information, especially sharing some of the insights from Myspace. I think we hear a lot about successes, but it's also very valuable to hear about learnings from things that maybe didn't work out. I think, to me, it seems like games are the perfect arena to demonstrate the utility and the value of digital assets. From your perspective, like, why isn't there a race for everybody to do this? What's the holdup?
Yeah, so there are very few companies, relatively few companies like A16 that are continuing to make investments that had the confidence in where they think the future of games are going. And so, quite frankly, there's less money out there that's being invested. I think there are also a lot of folks out there that were making NFTs and said, I'm going to make a game. And making a game takes deep expertise to do so. And so if you want to make a game, make sure, and you haven't made one before, make sure you have a partner that has made a game before, or a group of people that has made a game before. And the digital asset piece of it like fits in really well with current game design and current game economy. It just makes everything a lot more fun. But I think like the whole notion again of NFTs and the sort of dark winter that we've been going through just tamped down investment in the space without any really good reason. So we're super happy to be in the space. We're very bullish about it. I think we're looking for as many Web 2 folks that haven't experienced a Web 3 type of game or owning digital assets. And we're going to be targeting a lot of those folks because we believe the quality of our experiences are such that they'll really enjoy it.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, to me, I joined the Web3 gaming room yesterday, and it was fascinating to think some of these things that people traditionally do as mods or like customizations of weapons and things like that, it would be so cool to be able to transfer those items through a permissionless layer. It just seems like it's the right thing to do. So kudos on all the work, and
Totally.
excited to see.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Matt from Narval here. I'm curious how you're thinking about with Champions the onboarding and the UX around the crypto pieces. Since you're focused on a lot of like mainstream appeal, then how are you thinking about your wallets and your assets? Are you abstracting all of that like crypto complexity, or are you trying to like teach users about it?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So people, we think in the medium term, shouldn't even necessarily know that they have a wallet. So we will be providing them with custodial wallets. Right now, we're giving them the opportunity to participate in the Champions experience through a walletless login. For right now, it's we're going to be integrating custodial wallets, and that's how we think it scales really quickly. It's very important to have like an open protocol before you create tokens, which is very different than how things were 3 or 4 years ago.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I hope that wasn't too confusing. It's all very confusing.
Hey, Chris, Pierce, I actually think I'm the first A16Z crypto employee to ask a question, but your perspective is just so valuable, I couldn't help myself. Chris, we'll talk about the 3 eras of the internet, and we focused on it day one of the cohort last week. And you really eloquently touched on it in your journey through your different experiences. You talked about Match.com kind of going away when Tinder came around in the 2007, 2008 timeframe. As we enter this third era of the internet, are there things you're bringing with you from that 2007, 2008 mobile era that are helping you navigate the Web3 landscape, whether it's from like a regulatory perspective, whether it's from finding product market fit? Like what are some of the golden nuggets from your experience that the folks here might be able to take with them as they move into this new iteration of the internet?
Yeah, so some things I think we did really well. In 2004, 2005, we built the website like in 2 months. Like we went really, really fast because we knew that there was going to be a lot of competitors because the world was changing around us. And I think it's similar right now. So going fast is important. I'm a lot more focused on UI, UX. So I sit in all of our product meetings and we talk about very specific like UI, UX, like why isn't there a more prominent invite button here? Why doesn't it automatically take you to the top of the page? Like, why aren't your friend, like, I don't know, why isn't the comment button bigger? Just like a million different things like that are, I know, like how many invites should we give per person? Should we try and create scarcity? Should we start out with like a younger demographic? I have like the hypothesis that I think, for example, for the app that we're building, it's going to be 13 to 30 year olds. Like, should we start with just 13 to 30 year olds? Should we start with them, just in the LA area, within high schools and colleges around here, or people that went to high schools here, kind of like how Facebook did with the Ivy Leagues, or Snapchat did with like younger folks, versus going super broad right away. So those are all things that I'm thinking about a lot more. And yeah, I'd say like speed to market definitely took with us. I think the new thing is, like back then there wasn't the relationships with the app stores that are incredibly important. And like that's something I've learned in the gaming days. It's like those folks that run the app stores can make or break you. And if they get to know exactly what you're working on, and they give you a big feature above the fold, like this hero feature, like it can literally jumpstart you and change the trajectory as your company. I'd also say the app stores really love it when you use proprietary technology that they're coming out with. So having an understanding for what that is, like what's Apple's next new big technology that they want to push out to their developers, and let them know that you're somehow incorporating that in what you're doing. Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I would say also, from a hiring perspective, I think what we've all learned from the COVID days was like, and kind of where we are right now, is to try and do more with less, because we don't really know what's going to happen in the next couple of years, and we don't know how well we're going to be able to monetize over the next couple of years. People aren't giving away as many free grants anymore. There aren't as many venture companies. So like, as founders, we can all pitch in and do the work, a lot of the work ourselves, and be shoulder to shoulder with our employees, which I'm sure you guys all are. But yeah, don't overhire. I think we went through the whole COVID time period and we had 25% bump, and we thought, like everyone else, like, we're going to be up 25%, every year for the next 2 years, like forever, and it just didn't end up being that way. So that's why you're seeing a lot of layoffs right now.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris. Really enjoy your talk. And I'm Ling Long from Blockcast, and we are building a Web3 gaming platform. And so one of the common thing you mentioned about the opportunity that Web3 brings in for the games, but one of the major problems we see for the games, especially the big game studios, that they want a user to log in to their platform. They want all the assets log in because they don't want to lose all these players. And so I want to ask your perspective, or what kind of opportunity you foresee that the Web3 unlock for the gaming industry through like interoperability and composability?
Yeah, it seems like we're still a ways away from that, at least with the folks that I've talked to. So for example, you can have your game on a lot of different platforms, but in terms of any kind of NFT transactions or digital asset transactions, they need to happen somewhere else still. And so none of the big gaming platforms really support that right now. Epic is talking a lot about it. Xbox seems to be enthusiastic about it. Google seems to be enthusiastic about it, but no one's really jumping in.
Unity just launched an integration with MetaMask, but that's more on the developer side of things versus like a customer-facing distribution thing.
Yeah. Yeah, MetaMask is just like, I remember the first time I tried to install, it took me like an hour to figure it out. And like even walking people through it after that, it was just, it's incredibly complicated.
Yeah, totally. Another question I have is, you mentioned that you are designing like an open protocol. I wonder what's the major considerations during the protocol design for like a gaming industry? What's like major element inside of it?
Sorry, in front of?
When you design the game, the protocol inside of the gaming space.
Right. So one of the protocols I spoke about earlier, which is the guild protocol. Mm-hmm. And that's going to benefit like every game that's out there, every player that's out there, and every guild owner that's out there. So it'll be an open protocol for any game to adopt, as well as any guild owner to adapt. And what that allows you to do, if everything is decentralized and you have multiple people that adopt your protocol, a lot of it your competitors and other folks can use is a smart thing if you want to ever have your own token.
Got it. And then how do you think of the moat, kind of like the defensibility on the protocols?
Yeah, so from that perspective, we are developing our guild specifically for our needs and for the largest guild's needs. So like it's going to have the best fit with us and with those guilds that like adopt our game.
Got it. Thank you.
The other way that we're thinking about protocols are from the app perspective and the fact that AI image generation or video generation takes a lot of GPUs. And we're partway through the architecture and outreach of creating a decentralized network of GPUs that we can then sell via token and do that processing work for cheaper than other people can. So big moat as opposed to like, probably pay 20 cents on the dollar versus what you might pay at Google or Amazon for that processing.
Hi there, thank you for the chat. This is Cynthia from Mentaport. We build infrastructure for digital assets that interact with the physical world. My question goes around, I bet you have a really good perspective or point of view when it comes to social media and end user data. So what would you like to see happening in Web3 when it comes to this interplay of social platforms and end user data?
Social platform and end user data. I'm sorry, I'm not, can you make the question a little bit more specific?
Yeah, for sure. So in traditionally Web2, it
Yeah.
is assumed that the end user data is utilized to pretty much monetize through advertising, which typically may not necessarily benefit the end user. So Web3 gives us the opportunity to build more complex systems that pay into account like each end user, give like rewards for certain actions. But I'm wondering, like, is there any thoughts that you have had around data privacy or end user data management that you haven't seen in Web2, but you would like to see in Web3?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously going to be a lot less data from like an advertising perspective in Web3. The monetization, from our perspective, the way we look at monetization in Web3, and this is a little bit different than our app, but like if you look at Champions, it's a shared economy with our partners.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Greg from Narval. We are building a multiplayer wallet platform, so we enable organizations like guilds, for example, to decide who can do what with their assets, and so delegate usage of the assets or the wallets. I know that building great games is very difficult and complex. When you add the Web3 layer around managing a whole economy, it becomes very difficult. And so I wonder, what's your framework and how do you guys decide about what things you want to build internally versus partnering with third-party providers? How do you make those decisions?
Yeah, I think if there's anything that is a commodity that's out there where you can rent it, and you should do it. If there's 3 or 4 companies out there that have something, you should never build it yourself. I don't think we're going to start a new secondary marketplace. There's great companies that are out there that do that. I don't think we're going to start our own wallet company right now. We're not going to start our own payment rails company right now because those are all commodities. They're charging whatever 2%, and maybe it would cost us 1.7%. You have to hire, it's a total scale business. So all of those things that take scale and specific expertise that have been commoditized, we don't want to deal with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Emmanuel from Shield. So you mentioned this societal impact of the merge between mobile and gaming and how that kind of led to the democratization of gaming across different age groups. So looking at blockchain and the intersection that we're seeing with gaming now, what are some of those broad societal shifts that you see happening big picture?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think it's going to start with a more core audience. So I think most Web3 games will start with a more core audience. So probably more male. And then as mobile became more mainstream, the Web3 part will become more mainstream. And there will be a wider demographic. But I think the adoption right now in my opinion, in terms of the games right now, is definitely going to be more core. Because mobile doesn't really support it. And I think when I was talking about mobile before, that's the whole notion of games going on to mobile and mobile becoming the biggest sector of games is what democratized the demographics for game players. And mobile doesn't currently support Web3 yet. It's primarily PC-based and soon console-based and then mobile.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you, guys.